Street Mastermind. Excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys, and extra excited because today we have Emma on with us, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself in a second here. But Emma is just finished going through. I guess it was the summer 2022 recruiting process, right? And she was able to get a very successful outcome, and she's one of our Canadian clients, which most of the students we work with are in the US, but we've also worked with some Canadian students as well. So I thought I'd get her to come on here, talk to you guys about how the recruiting process is like up north, and there's some slight differences with how it works here in the US, and hopefully this interview helps those of you who are planning on recruiting in Canada yourself. So Emma, I want to thank you first and foremost for taking the time to be here with us today. And if you can, maybe just start off by introducing yourself a little bit and telling people who you are.
Of course. Thanks, Sam. So my name is Emma. I am currently doing my MBA, expecting to graduate in May at a MBA program in Toronto. And a bit about me would be, I come from a background in economics. I did stats and econometrics at Waterloo and went into investment management after taking a bit of finance courses and doing a finance stream in my undergrad. Went into investment management, worked there for about 4 years in a research and analysis role, supporting the sales team on an investment group. And from there, I realized that I didn't want to necessarily be in the investment management space at that time. I wanted to pivot and be a bit more into the deal space. Was interested in actually working with business owners, helping them build up their strategies, and be more part of the decision-making process. In investment management, I was working with high net worth clients. And so a lot of these clients were actually business owners themselves. And so that's really what sparked the idea for me. And then chose to do the MBA, just given my background in economics and a bachelor's degree. Chose to do an MBA at a top business school in Toronto in order to really make the pivot and also build the managerial skill set and the business knowledge that I guess in a way I felt I was missing from my undergrad. So that's what brought me here.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And so you knew you wanted to do investment banking prior to going to business school. Like going to business school was the reason, or actually the reason for going to business school is to help you pivot into investment banking. Is that right?
Yes. So yeah, I could probably unpack that a little bit, but the two entry routes to get into investment banking, at least in Toronto, would be number one is through your undergrad, doing a co-op and getting that summer internship and then getting placement, or number two is at the MBA level and doing it the same way, but getting into the associate role. So knew that was the entry point and saw the MBA as the best way to tackle both things, the managerial skill set, but also getting the job that I wanted.
Got it. Okay. So then you got into the business school, and then what were some of the things you were doing initially to kind of work towards this goal, I guess? Prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, even I'm sure you were doing a bunch of stuff on your own, right? So what were some of the things you were doing, or what were some of the resources that you were using to kind of prepare for the process?
Mm-hmm. So the school has a really big, most of their candidates go into financing or consulting. So the financing clubs are really strong, and the network and alumni groups are really supportive. And so I think it was 4 or 5 case competitions within the first term. So that was from September to December of my first year. Did 4 case competitions, and those were all investment banking, simulation type case competitions. So you have this mandate, spend the weekend analyzing these 2 companies and propose a structure, a financing structure for them, or assess whether or not this deal makes sense. And you work in teams, and so that really helped me get my feet into a position where I could see this is actually what the investment banking associate would be doing over the summer, obviously maybe in over a week or a few months period, but it still really gave me the chance to see what the job was like. And then another big part that I was working on was taking financial modeling courses. So I took about 7 of those to really understand M&A structuring, leverage buyouts. The school has there's actually a really good financial modeling and skill set. They're called the Marquee Group in Toronto. And so they have a lot of offerings. And so they're a really big resource, and they have connections with the school. So I got in with them, did a bunch of those, and then also did a bunch of free modeling type of like CFI type courses to really try and get my reps in. I also did a lot of networking. I didn't start off doing a lot of networking at the beginning, but as I kind of went through my first year, I ended up doing like probably 100 networking calls. But in my first term, I probably only did 15 to 20. I didn't realize like the impact of it, but it was really helpful, at least in the 2 jobs I had were both through networking. So you can see how it pays off. And then in terms of like mock interviews, the school also, the club helps you prepare for them. And so they send you a bunch of resources and they help you get through like a few mock interviews, but I didn't necessarily use those as much as possible. And so that's probably where, you know, I would say that was my mistake in the end. I probably should have used the networking a bit more and also the mock interviews that were provided by the school to get the summer internship. But in the end, I didn't have that.
Got it. Okay. I gotta say, like, you know, out of the clients that we've worked with, I feel like you're probably one of the what's the word I'm looking for? You're like one of the most prepared clients coming into the program, meaning like the amount of work you had already done on your own, like 7 financial modeling courses. I think that's like the most that I've ever heard from anyone. And so like, I guess like that begs the question, and probably a lot of people are wondering like, okay, so you're already doing all these things and you got, you know, clubs on campus, you got, you know, your school resources, you got the Marquee group, you got CFI, you got all these things. Like what made you want to, I guess, add Wall Street Mastermind to that and, you know, sign up for yet another program, you know, to kind of help you prepare with the process? Like what was the thought process, or what was the rationale, I guess?
I think I knew for me that when it came down to interviews, I was, as much as I read and as much as preparation I had, I didn't prepare enough on the actual, let's do a mock interview and let's see how my responses sound, make sure my communication's clear. Am I actually understanding these answers, or am I just rehearsing or reciting what I know from the Breaking Into Wall Street IB 400 questions? And so for me, it was that preparation in terms of actual verbally saying these questions out loud. I knew them all from writing them down. If I had a test, I could do it. It was, for me, it was, yeah, having the time to actually formulate my questions in a short period, or like in a, you know, 1 to 2 minute time frame. And I think just my nerves really got the better of me. And so I wasn't as successful in my interviews because of that.
You mean the interviews that you had prior to Wall Street Mastermind?
That is right, yeah.
Got it. What like, so you had already recruited before coming to us, it sounds like. Like, can you talk about that a little bit? Like what was like, how many interviews did you go through, and like what was the outcome? I guess like you didn't get the offer, it sounds like, which is, or else you wouldn't have come to us.
Yeah, so I didn't get any investment banking summer position offers. I did get a bunch of, I did also interview in like venture capital and private equity. I ended up landing a really good position in a private equity firm after going through so pretty much investment banking interviews go from the 2nd week of January to usually the 3rd week. And that's like, those are the big banks in Toronto, like those are done. After that point, the private equity firms and sometimes other like venture capital type businesses will come to campus. And so knowing my experience, knowing that I went through the interview process and I wasn't selected in the end. So knowing that for the investment banking, so knowing that outcome, I realized, okay, I really need to like hunker down here and actually get my reps in on interviews. And so I put that forward, got a private equity summer position, but they typically don't hire someone without investment banking. And so I knew it was just going to be a summer position. And I mean, I was planning just to use that as a really great experience to see how a private equity firm works, how they interact with the investment banks, and use that to get back into investment banking. And so that's what I decided to do. But to get back into investment banking, even though I had good experience, I have a good level of knowledge, I still need that interview prep. And so that's why I picked Wall Street Mastermind to really help me get there.
Got it. Okay. So for your summer internship, you didn't get the summer associate job, but you got a PE job, which is still pretty relevant to banking. But your goal was always to recruit again for a full-time associate position, basically at the end of your summer between your 1st and 2nd year, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, because look, I think like this is a good point, which is a lot of people, I think they don't realize this, but it's not like you're a bad candidate, and it's not like you were, I wouldn't say you were bad at interviewing. Like you got like a private equity job, which is still not easy to get. But a lot of people, what they don't realize is like, especially in Canada, like Canada is not a big market when it comes to like investment banking. And so there are like very few, there are fewer banks, first of all, but then like even within each bank, there are like very few positions. Like it's not like the US where you apply to New York and there are, you know, thousands of jobs or whatever, right? And so there's like only so many jobs, like a handful of jobs. And the difference between the person who got the job and sometimes the person who didn't get the job but got the interview, it's not like a night and day difference. You know, like people think like, oh, I need to like like I need to like improve by so much because I didn't get the job. Like no, like a lot of times like the improvements that you're making is just like it's the marginal things that are like just around the edges, right? And at the same time, like those types of improvements, I think are the hardest, right? Because
Mhm.
you've already like picked off all the low hanging fruit, and now you're talking about like really nuanced changes to your answer, or sometimes not even your answer, but like your delivery or whatever. And I think like when it comes to interviewing, it's really, really hard to like identify what those improvements need to be on your own because they're not the obvious, it's not the obvious things, right? Like the obvious things you've already identified them and you've already fixed them. Now you're like, okay, I was close, but I just need that like one extra little push and I know I'm good enough.
Mhm.
But like at that point it's like, okay, then you need someone who's maybe more experienced and maybe can point those things out to you, or just like a third party perspective, as opposed to like, because we're so, when we're the ones that are interviewing, like we're so like we're too involved, right? It's
Yeah.
hard it's hard to like see like, oh yeah, like I'm the way I'm saying this like could be a little bit better, because like obviously like however you were saying things before, that's already you putting your best foot forward, right?
Mhm.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I definitely thought it was like I still knew I had stuff to learn, but at the same time, I didn't think I was that different from the other candidates.
Yeah.
So like I knew it was like it was a matter of being, you know, second or third probably in the roundup, and which at the end, like I think this is probably like a good point for most candidates. Like year to year, the recruiting can change so much. Like in Toronto last year, I would say maybe there was maybe 20 positions at the MBA level went to investment banks. 20 positions. Those schools in Toronto have around 400 candidates each, and there's a few schools. And so if you think about it, like my school probably placed only 5 or 6 students,
Yeah.
and this year we've placed 20 at the school. So it was also like COVID was a, and there's other things that happened, but you know, the MBA candidates now going into associate programs, if the staffer at that bank it doesn't have his MBA, they don't have their MBA, they could also have a different opinion in terms of recruiting associates at the MBA level. They might want to recruit analysts up before they think about MBA students. And so there's many different factors that lead into, yeah, the recruiting numbers, and it doesn't always reflect on you.
Yeah.
So
Your school placed 20 people at the MBA level this year.
yeah,
So isn't that like the entire market?
there's probably 40 positions this year.
Okay, so because there's a lot more deal flow this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, so I mean, yeah, like market conditions always play a role, right? Like when things are booming and there's a lot of deal activity and whatever, like people are going to hire more.
Mhm.
Like I graduated in 2008, and that was like I experienced the opposite of that, where like no one was hiring and it was really, really hard. And so obviously there's some that's like out of our control when you graduate. There's a little bit of luck involved, but aside from that, though, whether it's 20 positions or 40 positions, bottom line is like it's not a lot, right? And then for you too, like recruiting for full time also puts you at a slight disadvantage, because whatever positions are available, they're first going to get filled by the summer associates who did an internship at those banks, and if they do a good job, they kind of have first dibs on these offers, right? And it's like
Exactly.
you're kind of like, by the time you were interviewing, usually what these banks have maybe like one spot left that they're trying to fill.
Yeah. And you're up against other analysts. from other banks too, right? Like the pool is not just strictly at whatever bank has that co-op placement, or sorry, whatever co-op placement is happening. Now the pool of candidates is way wider.
Right. Yeah. That's true. Like other analysts that want to stay in banking and get promoted to associates, they're going to be gunning for these spots too. So
Yeah.
that's a good point. So I guess that all makes sense. So then, like, you came into Wall Street Mastermind, I think back in like September, right? And then I think you got your offer in December.
November.
November. Okay, yeah. So it was like relatively quick. It was like a 2 month process where I feel like you were just like sprinting to like do all the things you need to do. But like, what were some of the things that we worked on in those 2 months, and like, what did you find to be most helpful, I guess, for your process?
I think as I've talked about it before, like the whole interview process, I knew where my gaps were. Like if I wasn't answering the question right, you can clearly identify that's okay. I need to go back over that material. I'm not answering that right. Those are easy things to fix. The behaviorals, the how I'm presenting myself, and also just making sure that I actually have an overall level of understanding of the content instead of just knowing the answers. And so over those 2 months, I think it really helped me to see how those answers were actually answered through some of your video sessions, watching previous candidates get mock interviews done, just seeing how other people are in that process, because it's one thing to get feedback, and like my friends would mock me before these interviews, and they would ask me really good questions, they would give me some feedback, but it was never, this is how I would, not actually like breaking down how am I responding to this answer, how could I make it more clear, how is my presence in the interview, how is all those other little things. Like when I saw how you would answer some of these questions and you would provide tips as to don't say everything up front, right? Like if they ask you what beta is, just explain what beta is. Don't dive into what the capital asset pricing model is, or like like those little things that sometimes you'll say just because you know it. It doesn't come off well. It sounds like you don't know it enough, so you're just saying everything that you can and just like throwing it at the person. And so those little tips that you hear it and you're like, that's so obvious, I should have known that beforehand, but that really helped me. And then doing a few mock interviews, I think it was like the team was great in terms of my interview process was so random. Like I was speaking to an MD one day and then they're like, okay, on Monday, do you want to get into our interview process? And it was like, okay, when's the interview process? Tomorrow at 12 p.m. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So reaching out to the Wall Street Mastermind team and saying, okay, I really need a mock interview, just like, I've been mocking the whole time, but it was just like, can you guys just like fit me in for 1 hour, before my interview? And having a big team at Wall Street Mastermind and being able to fill that need really quickly was super helpful for me. And I think that's what really helped me get through the process.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like a couple good points there was just like your example about like, hey, even on technical questions when they ask you something and kind of withholding certain information, even if you know it, and letting them ask you the follow-up. It's like you said, that's not like an obvious thing, or that's not like an intuitive thing to do. But going back to our point earlier, it's like at this point, at the level that you're at, like we're trying to identify the non-obvious things that you can improve on. Like all the obvious things, like you've already done it, right? And so, but like it's stuff like that can make a difference when it comes to like, are you the best candidate at Super Day, or are you like the runner up, right? Like sometimes it's just like it's that marginal. But then also like on the mock interview side of things, I think like, and like we always encourage people like do as many mock interviews as you can with upperclassmen, with friends, with whoever is willing to do it with you. But I think like one consistent feedback that we've gotten from our clients, and I don't know if this was your experience as well, is that when you do mock interviews with friends, one, a lot of times your friends are like kind of about at the level that you're at in terms of interviewing. So like when they're critiquing you, a lot of times the feedback is not going to be that in depth, or not going to be that helpful, because to them your answers, like there's not much to improve, right? Or like they don't really have anything to say. Or sometimes it's the other reason is like when you're mock interviewing with someone just like your friend or whatever, like they don't want to go too hard on you. They don't want to like make you feel bad. And then so they're just like, oh yeah, that was pretty good, or like whatever, right? But like a lot of our clients tell us, like when they get a mock interview, what they actually want is like, hey, go as hard as you can on me and like nitpick every little thing that I could be doing better, because ultimately that's what's going to actually make you better, not like, you know, not like having your interviewer, you know, feel bad about giving you constructive criticism or whatever, right? And so like,
Right.
we're not shy about doing that. Like, we feel like our job is to nitpick every little thing and just like, we don't want to leave anything on the table. If there's something that, because again, our belief is that it's all in the margins. And so like, there's no feedback or constructive criticism that's like too insignificant to mention, right? And that's kind of like our mentality. And I think like, you know, in the end, like it does make a difference on the results that our clients end up getting, right?
Yeah. And so just to add to that, like the office hours, like you do like behavioral, like some people would have, like some students or some candidates in your program would have like an interview the next day. And so they'd jump on to the hot seat. And sometimes I wasn't able to make all those just given my class schedule, but I would watch the recordings, or like if I was there, I took like such detailed notes on just the feedback that you would give to some of these candidates in the hot seat. Like, you know, I wasn't brave enough to get myself there, but it was still good to really see like just critiquing someone's career story. Like it's that's the first thing you say in an interview, and it's so important. It really sets a tone for everything else that goes on. And so if you don't have a good career story, it doesn't make any sense. You're not answering the right questions up front. I think that really can set the whole interview into one direction or the other. And so I think like listening to some of those, your feedback, and like even the other coaches, that like I took away those and I brought them to my career story and made sure that it was tighter.
That's awesome, because I think like the mock interview hot seat, the reason why we do it, I haven't really seen anyone else do it, but I feel like the reason why we added it is, you know, when most people prep for interviews, they're just thinking about what they're going to say themselves. And it's almost like they have blinders on and they're not thinking about anybody else. But in reality, when you think about, especially something like the behavioral interview, I mean, technical interview too, but like even more so for the behavioral interviews, like it's not about whether your answer is like the right answer or not. There's no such thing. It's about whether your answers are better than your competition's answers. And so like most people have no idea how their competition's answering these questions or what their competition sounds like, or there's no like calibration going on. It's like, hey, how do I stack up against other people, or how good are my answers relative to other people's answers? And so like being able to like actually observe other people's mock interviews and hear the feedback that we're giving other people, even though they're going to have different answers than you, at a minimum, that gives you a better sense of like, okay, hey, like there's still room for me to get better. Or like sometimes you see someone mock interview and they're not as good as you. That happens too. But like a lot of times, like you might see someone who's maybe ahead of where you're at. And I think that experience is very eye-opening for a lot of candidates, because most people come in and they think like, oh yeah, my behavior answer is already pretty good. Like everyone always feels that way. And until they see someone whose behavior answer is like even better than theirs, and they're like, oh, okay, actually there's another level to this. Like, okay, now like I have something to strive towards. It's like, if you can't visualize what that looks like, then you don't know what to even work on. But like once you hear it or see it one time, then you can visualize it and you're like, oh, okay, all right, like now I know like what I need to do, right? And so I think that's like one piece of the preparation process that a lot of people just, I mean, I guess it's hard to do it, right? Outside of something like Wall Street Mastermind, because it's not like, you know, other people are going to tell you like, oh yeah, this is how I'm answering my questions. Like, you know, like they're trying to get the jobs. They're not trying to help you get the jobs, right? And so I think like that's a really, really good point, which is like just being a part of a community like this and having other people who are also working towards the same goal at the same time as you, and then being able to kind of like just learn from each other. I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff. So I guess like, can we like, what was like the successful outcome for you in the end? Like at the end of all this, like obviously you went through a lot of interview prep, you've done a ton of networking. And then like, you went through several interviews, right? You interviewed with a couple different places. Is that right?
Yep. All the same bank. I chose my bank I really wanted to work at, and kept networking around the different teams there, and ended up getting a position as an associate in a mid-market investing group. So pretty excited about that. I worked in private equity mid-market before, and in Canada, at least, it's really cross-border transactions rather than some of the other groups would be a bit more concentrated in Canada. So I did want that, American exposure, and it's mostly M&A. So that was also like a big one for me. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that the M&A side is much more interesting than the capital market side. But that's just me. I mean, some people like capital markets, but I think that M&A is just more strategic in terms of like the thought that you have to put into the deal, and also it's a lot more technical, right? I mean, you having done 7 financial modeling courses, like I think you'll be well prepared for that. But like on the capital market side, usually there's like not too much modeling going on, and so it's just a different, it's just a different experience, different skill set, I think. But I think that's a great fit for you, honestly. I mean, with your background and doing middle market PE, and then all of your modeling skills and all that, I think you'll be a great fit there. So I guess like one last question for you. What is like, do you have like one piece of advice that you can kind of like pass on to the people that are kind of going through the process now, after like maybe someone who's also an MBA student, also trying to recruit in Canada or whatever, right? Like someone who's now in your shoes, or at least where you were before, like, was there a piece of advice that maybe someone gave you along the way that really, really helped you, or kind of like made a big difference for you that you can like share with other people?
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to structure this in how I would structure like most of my behavioral questions. I always do things in 3, and I think it's like a really nice way to structure these answers. So I have 3 takeaways. So my first would be do as much research as you can. Like when I networked with people and actually figured out what are the pain points of an associate in investment banking, what are the pain points of an analyst or the VP. And so when you're having conversations with them in a networking or an interview session, knowing what pain points, what they how they work with other people on the team, how they're like, an associate is in a way leading the analyst and showing mentorship, and helping them get to the next stage. A VP is really overseeing that whole process. And so in terms of like a lot of projects, a big thing is teamwork. And so thinking about how can you show off your teamwork abilities in the interview? How can you show off your ability to fit in with the team's culture? Like you're working with people all day. And so like just trying to identify the pain points and just the big factors with the day on the job. Number 2 would be at the MBA level, I found that the break into Wall Street questions are great. I've never been asked a single one of those questions in an interview. And maybe it's just like at the associate level, like they're looking for people a bit more experience. So know those questions, know why the answer is what it is, but also be able to build onto that. And so I think that was the gap for me. It was trying to take my corporate finance knowledge to the next level. And so maybe just be a bit more prepared in that sense, and knowing that those questions are typically not the ones that turn up on at least the full-time interview questions. Yeah. And then number 3 would be, I just had it. Oh no, I had something else. Okay, I'm forgetting it now, but okay. I guess the 3rd tip would just be, spend, like, you're paying for this Wall Street Mastermind program. Like, use the resources as best as possible. Like the presentations and the PowerPoint slides that I would download, and I would write out all the notes and like how you were answering the questions, and that really helped me understand how I should be structuring my answers. Like attend all the office hours, spend time with different coaches, and really figure out, and like I'm a planner, so like I had an Excel model like all laid out on like what I wanted to accomplish like each week, and like how many times I did reps on like the M&A, the LBO, all those different sections. Behaviorals are so important. I think a lot of people put those to the side, but spend a lot of time preparing those. Like I reached out to my career coach at my school to help me with the behavioral interview prep on the side of also doing all the technicals and the behaviorals through mock interviews. And I think it's really important to get those behaviorals down. So third one would, to sum that up, is plan well and use the resources, and at least like get a lay of the lands of like all the resources that the program offers, and then put those into a schedule for yourself and make sure that you're hitting those goals.
That's great. I asked for one piece of advice, you got three, which is amazing. You know, on that second point about like the breaking the Wall Street questions, I don't even think it's like an associate level thing. I think like we're finding that to be true across the board for most of our clients, which is nowadays, I think the interviewers have adapted because, you know, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when these guys were still relatively new, you know, it was an advantage if you read these guides and memorized the questions and you're already ahead of the curve. But nowadays, like every single person that's recruiting has those guides. Every single person is reading. I guarantee. I do not know one person who's serious about investment banking who has not read those guides. And like the interviewers know that too. And it really doesn't do anything for them to just like ask the exact same questions that are from those guys, because everyone's already memorized those answers. Like it doesn't help them make it doesn't help them separate like the candidates that truly understand these concepts from the ones that are just memorizing and don't really understand what's going on, right? And so in my experience, they actually are deliberately going out of their way to not just ask you the questions from those guides, right? That's why we always harp on this. We always tell people like, do not just memorize answers to 400 questions and then think like that's like what it's going to take to ace these interviews. Like if you do that, you're not going to get the same questions. And if you don't actually understand the concepts, you're going to get tripped up. Like every question they ask is going to feel like a curveball question, right? Even though it's not. So I think that's really, really great advice. But you know, guys, I think like if you guys are listening to this and, you know, maybe you are like recruiting for, up in Canada and like you understand how competitive it is up there, there's not a lot of jobs. And maybe you're even already a pretty good candidate like Emma is, but you understand that like, hey, like you just need to improve a little bit more, right? You just need that extra push, you know, not that you haven't done the work, not that you're not good enough or not a qualified candidate, but like, it's just that competitive and you want that extra bit of help to just kind of like put you over the top, then, you know, I would encourage you guys to reach out, schedule a call with our team. Let's just have a chat, see what your situation is. What are your goals? What do you actually need help with? And we can figure out together if we can actually help you with those things or not. And if we can, we would love to help you. If we can't, at a minimum, we can give you some advice on what we think you should do instead. But either way, if that's something that you'd be interested in, you can go and book this call with us at www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to speaking with you, okay? But with that said, Emma, I want to thank you for coming on here and sharing so many useful nuggets with, you know, our listeners and just insights on how the investment banking recruiting process works in Canada. I think, honestly, you are a great candidate, and the firm that hired you is lucky to have you. And you know, I can't wait to see all the success that you have as a banker going forward.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, guys, that's going to be it for this episode. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right, talk soon. Hey, if you like this video, click the like button and hit subscribe to get more content like this.